Today I want to talk to you about superpower, and after my talk I would tell you what my power is. But usually I'm a professor of economics. For more than 20 years I research on the question of inequality in the labor market, and in that role I travel a lot, to conferences, to workshops and to panels, and these are the places where you present your research or network show up. And I have to learn this. And I like that today. I like to meet new people, and it's very cool. So about 50 years ago, I met a colleague at such a conference, and I started with small talk. I asked him, "Hi, how are you liking the conference?" He answered, "Too loud." I tried again. "Oh, how was the trip to here?" His answer was irrelevant. I thought, what's wrong with the guy? And walked away. And over the years, we kept running into each other. The academic field is very small, the world is very small. At diner and during the breaks, I honestly avoided sitting next to him. And honestly, I also paid less attention to his work. Then one day, we ended up sitting side by side on a panel about gender inequality in the labor market. He spoke softly, almost to himself, and said, "We talk about gender inequality for over 30 years. Has been progress, small steps, but there is progress. We talk about intersectionality, again, small steps, but neurodiversity, hardly ever." And then he turned to me and asked me, "Who here actually knows what neurodiversity means?" Well, how about you? Do you know what neurodiversity is? Put your hands. Okay, cool. Back then, I didn't know. And then I started to research. I discovered a work of a woman, Judy Singer, an Australian sociologist and autistic activist. She researched in the 1990s and coined a word that we still use to describe human differences, neurodiversity. Okay. And I think, okay, what's the meaning? It means that every person has a unique nervous system with their own combination of abilities, needs, and perspectives. In other words, the different ways of thinking, feeling, and exactly that's what makes us human and powerful. But some people are marginalized for those differences. Their superpowers don't fit what society considers normal. For example, autistic people often think outside the box. They see patterns where others see only chaos. They focus deeply, love details. Or people with dyslexia think in pictures. They are spatial thinkers, creative problem solvers. The fun fact is that around 50% of NASA employees are dyslexic. People with ADHD have incredible energy. They think fast, jump between ideas, and lead with passion. That looks sometimes like restlessness. It's often pure creativity. Of course, it's only a tendency. All people are different. Judy Singer said something really powerful in 1999. Neurodiversity means seeing neurological differences as part of natural human variation of defects. So they are not bugs in the system. They are part of what makes us human. So, I spent many years studying inequality, and one thing I have learned is categories like gender, ethnicity, race aren't biological facts. They are shaped by society, by what we label as belonging or not belonging. That's not always bad. It helps us make sense of the world. But it becomes a problem when it leads to exclusion. And then it hit me. If that's true for gender and ethnicity, why not also for neurodiversity? Neurodiversity is not a social category, it's about ideas of what's normal and what's different. Neurodivergent simply means you think or feel in a way that's different from the majority. Okay. So, everyone in my community talks about diversity today in the university, companies, organizations, but when you do that, they usually mean gender, class, or race, not how people think or perceive the world. And that means that don't just exclude people, we overlooked talent. The neurodiversity movement connects, interestingly for me, directly to the great equality movements of the 20th century. The civil rights movement, the women's movement, the LGBTQI+ movement, and the disability rights movement. And the similarities are striking. While people of color, queer people, or people with disabilities have been fighting for visibility since the 1970s, the voices of neurodivergent people haven't been heard for far too long. Talking about superpower isn't to romanticize things, because neurodivergent people often spend years fighting against stigma. So, that was my research. And then, at the next conference, I spoke again with that colleague. He told me he's on the autistic spectrum in a moderate form. And he said, that's not unusual. About 1% in Germany are autistic. That's as many people as live in Köln. About 2 million adults in Germany live with ADHD. That's many people as in Hamburg or Vienna. But the real number is likely much higher because many people have never been diagnosed because they were not recognized by themselves or by the system. Interesting is that, international studies now estimate about 15 or 20% of the population is neurodiverse. That means roughly 1 in 5 people. I'm labor economist, it's my field, and these findings have important implications for the world of work. Work is one of the most important parts of our life. It gives us structure, independence, and a sense of purpose. But for organizations built on sameness, traditional hierarchies, and standard communication, neurodiversity can seem like a challenge. But neurodivergent people don't just face structures, they face stereotypes. For example, autistic people can't work in teams, or people with ADHD are chaotic, or people with dyslexia aren't intelligent. Because of these assumptions, many face exclusion. Applicants who disclose their neurodiversity aren't invited to interviews. Employees are passed over for promotions, or some are bullied or isolated at work. So many people hide their neurodiversity, and it's called masking. Adapting, pretending, suppressing who you are. But masking is exhausting. It drains your energy, it kills authenticity, it makes people sick. So, the good news is the future of work is changing. Teamwork, flexibility, creativity are more important than ever. Some companies are living that future, a future built on the inclusion of every talent. So, for example, in the in the tech industry, something inspired is happening. People on autistic spectrum are no longer overlooked; they are being intentionally hired here. SAP launched its Autism at Work program back in 2013. Since then, hundreds have been hired worldwide, and it's been a huge success. Or in Australia, a government agency built a neurodiverse software testing team, and their productivity up by 30%. And at JP Morgan Chase, neurodiverse teams achieved about 48% higher productivity than others. So the potential is enormous. Still, over 80% of autistic adults are unemployed in Germany. That's not a lack of talent, that's a lack of imagination. We overlook superpowers simply because we don't recognize them. So, ask yourself, is your workplace ready for the future? How is your workplace organized? How loud is it? How is the light, the space, the setup? Can people control the environment? Or are they overstimulated by it? Sometimes it's simple. Adjustable lighting, noise-canceling headphones, quiet zones, and social areas. These are the first steps to understanding how your organization treats neurodiversity. And what about your team culture? How do you communicate? Are you clear and direct? Instead of saying, please get that done quickly, you can say, please send me the file by 2 p.m. Precision, reduce stress. Talk about that in your team meetings, maybe. But you can see that flexibility is the key. That allows people with different brains to use their strengths. Think about flexible hours, about remote work. We discuss these things a lot in the context of gender equality or work-life balance. But what about neurodivergent people? So, ask, design, act, and make the difference. When we start seeing the superpowers around us, we all become stronger, not only at work, but in schools, in families, in politics, or in our communities. Look closer, listen carefully, and maybe, just maybe, you can ask someone, what is your superpower? Because we all have one. And I will tell you later. Thank you very much.